All right, John. So during a call last week with one of our district leaders, we had kind of an aha moment. We saw a parallel between a practice that we use in the classroom and a practice that could be leveraged for coaching. And I thought, why not discuss it on the podcast this week?
Yeah. Let's share. Let's share with this is what we want to do. We want to share, the discussions, the stories, the strategies that we're having with coaching district, leaders, coaches, math coordinators, as we support them during the year on the work that they're doing to build sustainable math improvement plans and create change and impact in their classrooms for their teachers. So, yeah, let's talk about effective coaching and effective coaching with purpose for the people that we're supporting. Like we may be, you may be a math coordinator listening, but you may be coaching coaches. You may be a coach who's then coaching classroom teachers. We've done all of those things, and we're talk with those people every single day. But I think what we are seeing is some of the pebbles that those our folks are having is in understanding. Like I think we're coaching and then we're not seeing adoption, or we're coaching and we're not seeing the impact, and we're coaching and it's like, I wish, this was, more impactful. Like we're not seeing the change that we're looking to see. And that's probably the most common response we get when we talk with coaches and support them. And I think when we roll back and go, okay, so what's really happening here under the hood? And we dig a little bit, we dig to find out, that they may be needing to kind of like restructure some of the language that they're using, but also restructure the purpose around what they're doing.
I'm going to paint a picture of what's happening in the district that I was just describing. So, in this district, the advantage that they absolutely have is that there's a lot of clarity around the change that they're hoping to see in their classrooms. And so, like many other districts, they're working toward mathematical discourse. They want to see, students justifying, reasoning, really strengthening those particular practices that rely on strong communication, and establishing an environment where student voice is the dominant voice rather than the teacher voice being the dominant voice. So, this district has done a lot of work around communicating that clear objective. They've also created a kind of rubric or look for document that's been shared with teachers and administrators and coaches to really define the shift that they want to see. So it's like, this is what it does not look like, and this is what it looks like. So an example of that would be, the dominant voice in the classroom is the teacher voice. And then on the other end of the implementation scale would be the dominant voice as the student voice. And so they have done a lot of the work necessary to have a very clear understanding of the work that they're doing collectively, the change that they're hoping to see. And so the leader that we've been collaborating with has made an investment this year to build capacity amongst the instructional mentors. So this is like the team of teachers who are coaches in buildings, who have the opportunity to, as you always say, like work elbow to elbow with a teacher, with students. And so, an action step is like, if we build the capacity of our instructional mentors, then we'll have greater impact on the practices that are happening daily in the classroom. And so the unique challenge they're facing, though, is that not all of their instructional mentors have a math background. They are effective teachers, but they're not specific to math instruction. They're not math teachers. And so we were brainstorming, what do you do to prepare these coaches, these mentors, to have impactful coaching conversations? And that's where the idea dawned on us that, we, as anybody who listens to the podcast knows, we are, huge fans of the 5 practices for orchestrating mathematical discussions. We've adopted in our own classrooms. It's almost like a framework that we use anytime we're delivering a lesson. But we had this moment where we thought about, that anticipation stage, where we anticipate what students are going to do, and then we plan assessing and advancing questions, is something that we could adopt for our coaching as well. And so what I mean by that is, it's a big ask of a facilitator to just have the right questions to ask on the fly in every situation that they encounter, particularly if they're new to the role, they're new to the content area, this learning is new for them. And so if that was in a classroom, what would we tell that teacher to do? We'd say, well, anticipate. Think about what students might do and then already have those questions in your back pocket. so that you are in a position to help that student move along the trajectory. So, can we use this same approach when it comes to coaching teachers? So, if we have clarity on the goal, we know exactly what we're working toward. Can we anticipate where teachers might be along the, implementation trajectory from zero implementation to full implementation? And then for all of the observable behaviors, could we anticipate by planning, assessing, and advancing questions that would guide us in those coaching conversations?
You know, it makes a lot of sense. Like I think this goes to a bigger, in a way, an issue as well, is that what you're saying is that we want our teachers to be doing this in the classroom. Is like we saying, like, we're helping them, think about assessing and advancing questions. We're helping them think about how to plan for our lessons using the 5 practices. It's tends to be a big focus for the work that we're doing when we're supporting our district. So, you know, we we are in those coaching roles where we're trying to have our teachers do this, but then when we think about it, that's good for good learning, right? Like it's not like it's not just a math thing, right? Like it is good structure for good learning to be able to basically anticipate, plan for those questions, and then in the moment when you see it, you're ready to kind of like add that question in, or add that thought, or keep the learning going. And you know we don't tend to do that in our coaching roles. Like we tend to be like try to be studying to be good coaches, good listeners, go where teachers going to go. But you know having the anticipatory component of that means you have to do a lot of actual thinking here before you go in, because like what you're saying though is like, in order for you to do that well, you have to have a bunch of things, right? Like you have to, and this is what we want our teachers to be doing too, is you have to have a clear trajectory of the learning goal. Like, what is it we're trying to do? What does it look like along the learning goal so that we're ready to have those questions? We want our teachers to do that too. What have I communicated to my students what it looks like when we're doing, we're along this trajectory? Like, so did we made sure the learning goal was present? Do we make sure that the success criteria is evident? Do we make sure that, we can communicate these things to the people we're trying to get them to move towards this learning goal or along this trajectory? We need to do the same thing with coaches, like with teachers, when we're trying to help them along a learning goal, which means like, have we defined what the learning goal is and have we made it clear to them? Have we communicated the success criteria along the way? In this district, they had, right? In this district, they had said, these are the things we're looking for. Here is our rubric that we co-created together. We helped them structure what that looks like so that they had this clear map of where we wanted to go. And then it's like, okay, now we have the clarity of where we're going to go. Everyone can see that this is a priority and these are the moves we want to get to. Now let's structure the support to move them along that trajectory. Like, we do need to be making sure that that's a huge component of the work. If you are going to say strengthen adoption in classrooms or move teachers down different trajectories of what we want, which starts with defining what it is, giving it a clear map, and then let's now plan to support along the way.
So, what I think we're envisioning is that once, all of those other components are in place, imagine you have an hour or a half day with your coaches. The coaching team is coming together. A really great exercise might be to actually co plan these questions, because the reality is this is hard work. Like, John and I are going to do it now, and it's not going to be easy. Like, it requires collaboration and a think partner. And so, why not come together as a coaching team and say to ourselves, okay, we know what the look fors are. Now imagine we observe this behavior. This is what the teacher's doing. This is what the student is doing in this classroom. What's an assessing and advancing question that we could ask to nudge them along this trajectory? And so let's make sure we're defining for everybody what we mean by assessing and advancing if they aren't familiar with the 5 practices. So, an assessing question in the classroom or in this coaching context helps us understand where the person is currently. It helps us unpack their current understanding, what they currently know, understand, and can do. So basically, I'm just going to take what I observe and ask a question about it to dig a little bit deeper, to kind of lift the hood to see the thinking that went into that particular strategy or approach. That would be our assessing question. Our advancing question is a question that I posed to help them move further, get closer to the learning goal. And in the classroom with students, that might mean, getting them to think about a strategy that's maybe more efficient or more sophisticated. So in the context of this coaching scenario, it's like asking them a question that's going to have them maybe reflect or consider something they hadn't considered before.
That, in a way, it makes me think of, like, when we think about the assessing questions, we shared the 7 coaching questions we all need to be asking, which, were from the Coaching Habit, which is not a teaching book, but it's a book specifically around how to talk less and hold off on advice giving, which is, in a way, the assessing components, right? So asking the questions like, what, we always use what's the pebble rattling around in your shoe right now, which was helps get a problem out. But if you're asking an assessing question, it might be more specifically to kind of like what you're saying is help us understand what's happening. The other question that we were saying in that, say, 7 key questions for coaching that helps you kind of gain some clarity is, I think, a key question that we can always kind of ask is, if you ask a question about their understanding of where they are on say, a particular practice, and they start to kind of give you some of the pebbles that are along the way, because that's going to happen with educators, is ask the what else question, right? Like, what else is happening here to help you kind of go down this pathway. Those are 2 from the 7 questions. Yvette, what about some assessing questions for you?
Okay, well, let's paint a scenario. Like, let's actually dig in and give an example. Like, imagine we're in this coaching session with our team, and let's keep the goal the same. So we're working toward, a student-centered classroom environment that allows meaningful mathematical discourse. So let's describe, not zero. Zero would be like the teacher does all the talking and the students are like passively sitting and getting. So that would be like 0 implementation. But let's say we're closer to like level 1, where it's like it's still a lot of direct instruction, but the teacher is asking questions and giving students an opportunity to maybe turn and talk. Okay, so it's like we've made a shift. Like, we're starting to see more student discourse, but it's like, very limited. It's in the direct instruction environment, and it's really only leveraging the one routine of like think, pair, share. Like, it's like, we're turning to our elbow partner and we're having a quick conversation, and then we're coming back to direct instruction. So I think we can envision what this classroom looks like, sounds like. What would be an assessing question to ask that teacher?
So I am observing that we're asking, the teacher is asking kids to turn and talk in this lesson. And that was their understanding of and also you have to also make the assumption that we've clearly articulated that what it looks like when we're doing, or we could be doing, say, the discourse at a higher level. Right. So if Yvette, define to me what discourse looks like at a higher level so that I know where I'm trying to go, so I can ask an assessing question to see where they currently think they are.
Oh, man. So I always use this quote from Lucy West, which is, students are sitting around talking like little mathematicians.
Right.
So it's like they're, debating and justifying and defending, and they're using math vocabulary. And it's like a really robust environment where you almost think about it as, we're all working towards proof or mathematical understanding. And there's all of these spaces where students are learning with each other, with the teacher.
Sure.
And the dynamic is not, I also love this. Lucy West says that when you are in a classroom where it's all like teacher, student, teacher, student, teacher, student. So it's like, you've seen this classroom where it's like the teacher asks a question and then one kid puts their hand up and that one kid answers it. Mm-hmm. She always says like, that's like sleepy time for everybody else.
Sure. It's
like the 1 or 2 kids that you've, put their hand up are engaged and everybody else is asleep. So the opposite of that is like, the teacher isn't the knower or the sole keeper of knowledge in the classroom. They're just a really strong facilitator, and it's like the community of learners is coming together to, come to common understanding of generalizations of math. So like that's the far extreme, and you can picture it, right? Like all these little mathematicians debating, patterns and structures.
So.
I've seen it. It's possible.
Right.
I've seen it. Like when all the conditions are in place, this is possible. So imagine it's like on one end, again, you have direct
Yep.
instruction. The other end, you have this, community of learners who are justifying, reasoning, defending, debating,
Yep. Okay.
seeing relationships, all these things happening. The teacher's not the sole keeper of knowledge in that room.
Right.
So now we have a teacher who, has stopped the monologuing
Yep.
and is at least, pausing during the monologue and putting some of the opportunity for the students. And we always say, I quote this all the time, it's like they're beginning to understand that the person doing the talking is doing the thinking. And so they're building in, brief moments throughout the direct instruction monologue to have students turn and talk.
Right.
So now let's let's plan a question for this teacher.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. That paints a great picture. I think what a question that I would ask, and I think a good question is, and this can be asked in lots of different contexts, right? Is to say like, okay, so you're clearly asking for the turn and talk. Like, what is it that you're hoping that they learn or you learn from that turn and talk? And then again, assessing, because you want to hear what they have to say, because you're trying to say, is there clarity on the purpose of using, say, these strategies in the classroom, and where you're trying to, what you're trying to elicit from your students? So asking that question of just kind of saying like, what is it you're hoping to gain here? Can help you understand whether they're on the right track or not.
Maybe another assessing question that I would ask is, why at that point in the lesson? So I noticed that after you said this, you stopped and you asked students to turn and talk. What was
Why
that
there?
strategic? Why did you feel that was the appropriate time to, hand it over to them?
Yeah, and the anticipation there, right, is because now you have to anticipate too what the responses could be, right? Like when you're thinking, you have to role play this out as an effective coach to go like, okay, well, if they say, well, I thought I was talking too much and therefore I stopped to ask that. Like, you know what I mean? Like you got a sense of like where their thinking is on this and where their real thinking is on what they're trying to do, because I think that will tell you a lot if they can answer that question appropriately.
All right. So what would be an advancing question? So it's like you want to, so you're, you've seen a change maybe. So we described like maybe this teacher, it used to be all direct instruction, all sleepy time for everybody else. And now they're finding opportunities to give students an opportunity to turn and talk. What might you say to them as a question that would help move them further along this continuum?
Yeah, I think what I would do is, because I want to, maybe this is still an assessment question. I don't know. I'll let you kind of decide, because I feel like it's both. But I mean, like, just I find it, because it's, I think it's both. Is it helps you see, but also them see, which can be an advancing question, because and then that question I think would be like, well, is there anything preventing you from like finding more spots like that? Right? Like, so which means though, it's going to make them go, I can then advance my thinking to go, I'm going to find, or what will help me find more spots. But then it also tells you if there's a blockage, a pebble along this journey that's preventing them from doing that, which can then help you on the next part for advancing as well.
I think that's advancing.
Yeah.
For sure. Like I
I
definitely
think it's a
think
both.
I think that it's, and I think I'm struggling too, distinguishing the two, because it's like, I need to unpack, and that's why you need both. It's like, they almost go together. It's like, I need to unpack the current thinking in order to, extend or promote thinking. So the one that I was thinking of, it's like, kind of goes back to what you said, which is like, did you get what you were hoping to get out of that turn and talk? Right. So it's like, did that turn and talk help you get closer to your goal? Like, what did you learn from it? What did students learn from it? And then I think my advancing question would be, are there other structures and routine beyond turn and talk that we could put into place to promote meaningful discourse?
Yeah. Or like, what does it look like? Like, what would class look like if we had, more meaningful discourse in the classroom, and let them decide on like what, because that's a variation on what you just said, because it gives them the ability to paint the picture of what their class looks like. And then the follow up for me would be, well, what are the pebbles? What are the things preventing us from getting there, so that we can deal with those on a case by case basis?
So I think that, our big idea from this episode today is that this work is hard,
Yeah.
and especially, we know there's a lot of change. We hear this all the time. It's like you just get the ball rolling with a coaching team, and then you have changes in coaches next year, and maybe you're starting with a new group, or you're onboarding two new coaches, and we're making the assumption that all coaches feel comfortable walking into these situations and know what to say. And I just don't know that that's fair. Like, I certainly wouldn't be, confident if I didn't have a community to talk it through with ahead of time. So if we do have meetings with coaches, I think it's worthwhile to kind of engage in this process where it's like, okay, and I know that the district that we're working with is doing this, like they are role playing, where it's like, imagine we walk into a room and we identify that a teacher is at, step 2 on the implementation continuum. We know that because this is what we're observing, this is what teachers are doing, this is what students are doing. Okay, what types of questions could we ask them to assess where they are and advance
Mhm.
them along the learning trajectory?
Yeah. No, this is a good example to talk about, the four stages that we typically help our partners with through in designing improvement plans for sustainable growth. This falls in like stage 2 land, which is really optimizing and sustaining your structures, because I think a lot of times we miss when we're planning for improvement and we're planning for professional development to happen in our schools and our school districts. We plan for teachers to get professional development. We talk about strategies. We talk about, maybe we do focus in on content knowledge for those teachers. But I think the part that I think often gets missed, and this is the part in stage 2 that we often bring up with our partners, is how are we planning to support the support, right? Like if I'm at the math coordinator level and I'm trying to design what my program looks like, how do I make sure that I've now accounted for supporting the people to make them quality facilitators? Because like you said, like there's maybe high turnover, or maybe we just making an assumption. Like you tap someone on the shoulder and say, "Hey, you were great in the classroom. You're going to be an awesome coach." Like that's not necessarily true. How are we making sure that our coaches are supported and have the right tools in their pockets to do the work? Because if we are going to build a sustainable program, we are going to point, at say this classroom that we're trying to create, this vision of mathematics in our schools, in our districts. If we have that clarity, and we also know what are the 2 to 3 things that we're going to focus in, our focus zones for the year, how do we support all those people that are going to help us do this work so that we can all move together stronger and faster? Because the reality is you've got coaches that are in the building, like you said. This district has coaches that are, say, not math specific. They're instructional coaches, but we probably overlook supporting them, and we didn't plan to support them. We just kind of planned around supporting teachers, but not the coaches. And that's a misalignment, right? Like there's a misalignment there around the 2 different structures, because you've got one arm of the work that's happening is not aligned with the other arm of the work. And we got to make sure that alignment is happening. So even though we're specifically talking about how do we plan for assessing and advancing questions here, the bigger picture is now zoom out. We've got to make sure that we're actually designing structures and plans to support people who we probably overlooked in the past. Okay, so we talked about that specifically. The 4 stages that I kind of mentioned is what we do to support schools and school districts. But really, those 4 stages are around how do we create and support the 6 components of effective mathematics in our schools, our school districts, and even our classrooms. We have a free assessment that you can take if you have not yet taken it already. You can head on over to makemathmoments.com/grow. Makemathmoments.com/grow. It's going to ask you, I think it's a 7-minute, maybe 10-minute questions on the 6 areas. It's going to send you a customized report based off those questions that you answer, and it will pinpoint which of the 6 you may want to focus on first when you're designing improvement plans, when you're designing effective professional development for your district or for your school. So again, makemathmoments.com/grow. Check out that resource.